Hey guys, my name is Todd Stevison,
Hi, and I'm William.
and we lead the combined impact. Our vision is really simple. We meet leaders where they are, but refuse to leave them there. So we're aiming for empathy and impact. And we were really excited about our in-person event in January and our second in-person event in April. And then the whole world went digital. So we are too. So glad you're joining
Absolutely.
us today.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, we figured that we would take advantage of the time that we have been given, especially as everyone's staying home and whatnot, and really host a conversation and a narrative that is focused on the situation that we are all experiencing together. There is one thing that this situation has shown me. It's that it has really pushed people to be in similar situations. Now, everyone's really isolated because they're at home, but we also are all really connected to each other because we're all going through this exact same situation. Doesn't matter if you're rich, you're poor, you have a job, you don't have a job, doesn't matter your family situation. We're literally all experiencing this together right now, and we're all in isolation, which is crazy. So yeah, we figured that we'd take this time and we'd host a really important conversation and a dialogue around the struggles of work-life balance and that tension, especially as it equates to our home lives, because we're all at home right now.
Yeah, and I think that's something that Will and I have been talking about is just, at one point, just a few weeks ago, a couple months ago, for some of us, depending on where you're at in the world, like
Yeah.
primarily the workforce happened in the office setting.
Yeah.
And now primarily the workforce happens in our home. Like I'm sitting here in my bedroom. I see your kitchen. Is that kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Yeah.
living
I
room?
mean, living room, kitchen area.
Yeah. So it's just totally different. And I'll just kind of share my personal experience. About 4 years ago, I was very unhealthy in the realm of work-life balance. And
As we all
so
are.
yeah, well, and I definitely started taking some steps. I think one of those is I went to Dr. Womack, who is my counselor, and
Yeah.
Whitney and I, who's my wife, we had some really good conversations. And basically, I've been on a 4-year journey, and I'm far from perfect. But before this hit, I would have called myself healthy, like in a good place,
Yeah.
moving in the right direction. And then this happened, and boom, it
Yeah.
blew up all the boundaries I had between my office time and my home. So
Yeah.
I've been trying to find my footing in this.
Yeah, and I think that's a big struggle and a big tension that people are having is a lot of people were kind of forced into some form of effective and efficient working while they were in an office because it's a tailor fit environment for that. So you come into the office and to some degree you're leaving a lot of your personal things at home, you're leaving a lot of your personal distractions at home, and this is an environment that is tailor fit for you to be productive. And there are still people that even found the ability to not be productive within that. I'm probably one of them from time to time, plenty of times, honestly. But I mean, that was already something that could be attention for a lot of people, is being effective within that environment that is supposedly supposed to be tailor fit for that. Now you take them out of that environment and then you put them in their home environment. And the people that didn't have a structure beforehand are really struggling to be productive in their current position from home because they have no life situation that's set up to promote that. Their whole life structure was built around when I'm in the office, I'm in the office. When I'm out of the office, I'm out of the office. And that's how they divided their work and life. And some people didn't even do that because people love bringing the office home with them. But now I think you see people that are just really quickly going to one of two extremes. You see people that are really quickly becoming very unproductive, very lazy. They might be binging Netflix all day. They might have zero structure on when they start and when they finish their day. And then likewise, you have people in the other direction too that I've seen and talked to that's their work doesn't stop or end. It is omnipresent in their life.
Yeah.
They are always working, and they might stop and do something real quick that's not working. They might eat dinner with their family, but they're always connected to their email via their phone.
Yep.
There's always on their iPad or their laptop, and they just never stop. And there's no healthy boundaries for them to really put down the work and then focus on their personal life either. And that's a big tension and struggle.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, if you're watching this, just kind of think about pre-COVID-19. Were you more reactionary or were you proactive in how you approached your work week? In other words, were you making your schedule or were you letting your schedule basically make you and control you?
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think the people that were letting their schedule control them are really struggling in this time. I think
Yeah.
people like you and I, who we would make our schedule, but then sometimes it would still take back control of our lives. And
Oftentimes,
we'd
all the
struggle.
time. Let me tell
Yeah.
you, I make my schedule and then I get that dang email that throws off my entire schedule because this project is due right now. It's crazy. Yeah, and I
Yes.
mean, it's really affecting everyone because they don't have the formal structures, whether it's as abrasive as a boss looking over their shoulders
Mhm.
or as simple as just a new environment. They don't have that structure that pushes them towards productivity. And so now they're kind of drowning in this new reality because we're all at home more or less 24/7.
Yeah, and I think you still have somebody over your shoulder, like
Yeah,
like my wife or kids could come in at any point, and I
right?
think we're all responding to that differently. Some of
Yeah,
us are honestly being resentful and like, "Get out, it's work time." Ah,
sure,
and some
sure.
of us are going like, "Okay, I'm just gonna walk away from work and not produce
Yeah,
anything." So
right.
it's like I think we're losing as a workforce a lot more than we're winning right now. I know that's how I
Sure.
felt. So hopefully we can help move us forward a little bit, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think balance is at an all-time lacking, like that healthy tension, because people are just taking it in one direction or another, and they're not taking that fight to get that back into the middle and to balance that correctly. And I know something too that's super interesting about this situation is people are constantly kind of looking towards other people's situations and away from their
Yeah.
own. Kind of like a grass is always greener mentality in the sake. And I think you mentioned before we actually started this call, what was the phrase that one of your leadership friends had said?
Yeah, he said, "The grass is always greener on the other side." And he said, "Of course it is. There's more crap over there."
Right?
And I'm
Exactly.
like, he's right, you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, like I know plenty of people that have been kind of laid off or furloughed, and so they're not actually working at home, and so they're getting an opportunity, quite frankly, because they have more time on their hands than ever before. But then they're maybe squandering that a little bit because all they're doing is looking at the people that are employed and thinking, "Man, I wish I was in that camp." And then I know plenty of people, myself included, guilty as can be at times, that
Mhm.
are still insanely blessed to be employed and still be working and going, man, just wouldn't it be so nice if I could just like take these like weeks as these other people are doing and be able to invest back into me and back into those around me and
Yes.
whatnot. And so I think everyone's just kind of looking to other areas versus where they're currently at. And instead of optimizing and trying to encourage growth in the area that they're in, they're just trying to
Mhm.
look to other areas and live in that other reality rather than just kind of accepting and maximizing the one that they're in.
Man, you're exactly right. And, Cody Disney is one of our good friends, and he had mentioned to the team that I work with at Public Church, our team, he said, "Look, like, let's view this like a marathon." And I really began to think about that and process it. And so, some language I've put around this is the idea of, okay, I've got to run my race at my pace.
Yeah.
Because in the marathon, it's so easy you get past, you think, well, I'm going to do what she's doing, but now I'm competing against myself. But even though, like, I know that and I have that language, there are
Yeah.
days that I don't implement that at all. And there are
Yeah.
days that I'm looking over the other side of the fence. And even though I know that they have their own issues, so
Right.
it's hard. Even when we know what we should do, it's just difficult. And I think another layer is that 40 hours feels more at home than it is
Yeah.
at the office. I mean, I was talking to Whitney yesterday and I was like, it's just 40 hours. Like, and we were agreeing. It wasn't like, we're like,
Yeah.
it's not that much. Like, there's people that work 50, 55, 60 hours and they make it work with the family and with children. But for some reason, because you're at
Yeah.
home all the time,
Yeah.
40 just feels like it is 60. And I've worked 60-hour weeks. And so
Yeah.
it's like, it feels way different than it did if I was putting in 45 hours at the office. So it's just weird, even how things feel, you know?
And I think there's two perspectives and two sides of that, because if you think about it, let's say you're being kind of as effective and as efficient as you were in the office, but 40 hours feels like it's so much longer. It honestly might be pointing a hot spot on you of seeing how inefficient that you were while you were at the office. And that's a real
Yeah.
thing, because like I know so many people who you put them in an office environment and they'll work 40 hours. Heck, they'll probably work closer to 60 just to hit what they actually could do in closer to 30 if they were eliminated from those distractions. And so some of
Mm-hmm.
us are just thrown in environments that have more distractions than ever. And quite
Mm-hmm.
frankly, some of us too, a lot of those like office distractions are stripped away because you're at home and all you really can do is work on what's in front of you, which theoretically is going to make you wildly more effective. And we've seen that, like statistics show that there are people that work from home and are just wildly more efficient and maximize their time. But then there's
Mm-hmm.
also a lot of people that don't really have the capacity to work from home well, and thus they're wildly more ineffective. That's not the right way. They're wildly
Yeah.
ineffective. There we go. I got there. Versus being more effective. And I think a lot of that comes down to kind of the processes that you put in place for yourself, the structure that you put in place for themselves, the accountability, and then also
Mm-hmm.
kind of like your environmental things. And I think that's something that we're planning on talking about today is what are the main things that you can actually do in your new environment as you're thrown into this new work environment, which is your home, to maximize your level of output so you can really make sure you're having an effective work-life balance. Because quite
Yeah.
frankly, there are a lot of people that are working more and getting less done. And we really
Mm-hmm.
want to obviously flip that and work less and get more done.
Yeah, I love that. So if you're okay, let's go ahead and go there. Let's talk
Yeah, I
about,
think that'd be
we
awesome.
had three things. We may get into a little bit more, but three things
Yeah,
that benefit us. The first thing we talked about was just self-management through structure.
yeah,
And I think when I first came home, I tried to take all my office structure and just put it into my home environment. And I really
yeah,
quickly realized that doesn't work. This is a
yeah,
new environment. There are new rules.
yeah.
Um, and so you have to be able to figure out some of those new rules. So how has that helped you? What are some ways that you've managed yourself and set up some structure at home?
Right. And structure is so huge. And it's something that like this isn't obviously a new concept. And people have been through books and podcasts and videos for years, talking about the necessary structure to live a full, healthy, and productive life. And it's funny, there's YouTube videos that have gotten insane views over the years. It's like, this is my morning routine because this is the structure that sets me up for success. And there's
Mm-hmm.
books written about like, hey, these millionaires and these business professionals, these are their routines because this is what sets them up. And it's interesting because one, it's never a one size fits all. There are a lot
Yeah.
of similarities between them, but they all have different things and they're all wildly more successful than I am. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not like if I just copy this one person, I'll be as effective or as successful or whatnot as them. So I think that one, it's super unique to who you are. And then it's also super unique to your priorities and values in life. Like there are a lot of people that they're in a position to where they don't have to prioritize being at a dinner table come 5:30 or 6. And so
Mm-hmm.
their structure looks a lot different than the people that have prioritized to do that in their life. And that's a good priority. That's not a bad priority in any shape, form, or fashion. But I think that your structures are going to change based off of your priorities. So I mean, something that I know is really something as simple as a basic structure of I'm gonna wake up. This is when I'm gonna be
Yes.
sat down, ready to start work. Even scheduling in things like your break times, because it can be really easy to let
Mm-hmm.
those build up super quickly. Well, I'm just going to take like a 5 right now and hop on Facebook. I'm just going to take a second and hop on Instagram instead of saying, this is when I'm going to take a break. This is when I'm going to do lunch. This is when I'm going to
Yeah.
wrap up for the day. If you don't have
Yep.
those target time points, it's really easy to get lost throughout the day. What have you been
Mm-hmm.
experiencing in that?
You know, I love that. And I think an area that I'm really trying to create structure in this week is self-care. I think
Yeah.
I realized that that had really slipped quite a bit out of my
Yeah.
life when I came home because, again, going back to Dr. Womack, the first time I went to see him, he was like, figure out what makes you healthy, like mentally, physically, spiritually,
Yeah.
emotionally, and prioritize that. So I knew to do that,
It's
but then I
huge.
get home and like I hadn't journaled the whole time I've been home.
Sure.
So Friday night about 2:45 in the morning, in some tension-filled moments, I couldn't sleep, and I was like, "Okay, I'm going to journal." And
Have
it
a
was
journal.
just like
Yeah.
this release and this realization too of like, I've got to create time for moments like this. So
Yeah.
something our team is implementing this week is we talked today about, hey, let's try to build in 1 to 2 hours of self-care in your workday. Like
That's awesome.
you're on the clock, but like let's try to work that and let's evaluate it next week because let's just see how it goes. But I hope that that's a tangible step that I and our team can take this week to create some
Yeah.
structure.
That's super awesome. And I know that what's really cool about that, and you really have to look at this from like a macro perspective of efficiency within a workplace. But if you're able to set your people up for success through positioning them to take care of themselves, I
Mm-hmm.
have this sneaky feeling that they're going to be wildly more effective and productive and better people to work with the other 39 hours throughout a work week
Yes.
if they just prioritize that 1 or 2 over the course of the week for self-care. Because
Yeah.
ultimately, like, and it's so interesting, like studies show there are people, like they've done test groups of being people that took really good care of themselves and rested 2 days a week and then worked really efficiently the other 5 days versus the people that just worked all 7 days
Mm-hmm.
and they worked longer hours and got less done. And it's because they weren't taking care of themselves. And so they were trying to push through with the grunt and grit of, I'm just going to work this out, instead of saying, hey, how can I position myself to make sure I'm a healthier, happier, better person? And then through that, they're wildly more effective when they're in their set amount of work hours, which is awesome. That's super cool that you're doing that. You didn't tell me about that before this. That's amazing.
Well, yeah, honestly, I forgot. And I think, but I will say this too. I think another like big structure that I had in my old routine that I'm trying to transplant to this one is the idea of the Sabbath. And I know that not everybody watching follows Jesus or maybe knows that biblical concept, but it's also in all kinds of leadership books of just like take 24 hours and unplug.
Yeah.
And man, Whitney and I, we had it. Sunday evening to Monday evening. Then it was awesome. We were killing it. And then this happened. Poof, everything's changed. So what we've done is we've had to re-implement it, reimagine it. So what we did, we took a Sabbath from 1 p.m. Sunday to 1 p.m. today. And honestly, I think our whole family just feels
better.
Yeah. And that time may shift, but just prioritizing that 24 hours, I think, is going to be huge for us going forward. So that's a part of our structure we had to reimagine, but it's so essential, you know?
Yeah, it's huge. And I love when Todd talks about Sabbath, because he's always pushing me there, because it's so real. Because like when it comes to the tendency of overworking versus underworking, I always lean towards overworking. And so oftentimes like that Sabbath really slips from my life. And it's funny because I know the logistics behind this. I know the details. I know the science. I know that if that is prioritized and I do that more efficiently, I'm going to be way better in all the other areas of my life. And yet I still find a way to let that slip from my life regularly. And so that had been something that had been slipping well towards the end of 2019 before this situation. And it was something that at the start of 2020, I said, listen, I have to reprioritize this. And it might look a little bit different than other people's Sabbaths, but I'm still going to implement it in the way that works under my current situation. And I started that, and that was really successful. And I've been doing well at that. That definitely slipped over the past few weeks, because we're trying to constantly pivot and navigate this situation from a work standpoint. But I was able to do that for a good portion of the day on Sunday. And that was truly amazing. And it was really interesting. I was texting one of the people on my team, and kind of at the end of every Sunday night, we kind of just end up gearing up for Monday. It just kind of naturally happens. It's like, let's just make sure we're on the same page walking in tomorrow, so we don't walk in wildly off axis. And I was finding myself going, I can't wait to hit tomorrow. Like, I'm really excited to get going. And I hadn't been saying that the past few days. And I realized really quickly, I was like, I'm saying that because I'm well rested. And I know that I'm going to be more productive tomorrow. And I have been, because I was well rested, versus the days before that, when I'd just been going and going and going. I really lost the fuel to continue to be productive within that.
Man, I love that. Now that's awesome. And that's how I felt today as well. And let's talk about number 2. So number 2 is just this idea of eliminate distractions. And I think this really is a good transition from what you just said, because we can't create the space to unplug for a Sunday afternoon like you did if we're distracted all the time throughout the rest of our work week.
Right.
You know, so figuring out how to do this is huge. So what are some things that you've done, or some obstacles that you found in this season?
Yeah. So I love talking about this topic, because I can like hear my mom in the back of my head, just like elbowing me in my back saying, I told you so. I told you so. Because I grew up homeschooling. And so I had to figure this out. And more importantly, my mom, and then she had to ingrain it into my head, had to figure this out a long time ago. Because when your kids are home and homeschooling all day long, every day, you really have to set up structure and proper environments that eliminate distraction, so that you can focus in on that stupid math class I failed a time or two, or whatever it is. And I mean, I think the interesting world that we live in right now is we can have a conversation right now through technology, even though we can't physically be together. And that is a beautiful, borderline magical, amazing thing. With that though comes a super dark side of, I am constantly at every single person's beck and call, and my attention, instead of being 100% focused on what's in front of me, is maybe a solid 60% focus, because the 40% is on my teammate that just texted me, and that project on the back of my mind that I know I need to text my boss about, and the fact that my boss could text me at any minute and he could ask for this, XYZ, this person, that person, my friends, spouse, kids, whatever, always have access to you through these digital means. And I think that's the first thing that needs to be the first to really get locked under control is like notifications on devices and open accessibility to everyone being able to talk to all the time. Which again, I'm one of the most guilty about ever. So like, I'm the perfect example of what not to do, in the sense that because of just kind of the environment that we're in at work right now and my responsibilities within that, I have notifications on for my email, which is the worst thing anyone could do ever. It's a terrible thing to do. If you have notifications on for your email, you're already a step at a disadvantage and a step behind people. Because at any point in time, I get sent an email and it pops up on my phone, and then really quickly I'm focused on that and I'm not focused on what I was just focusing on. With that though, the do not disturb option on phone and laptops are magical. And that allows you to really focus in on times when you're focusing on projects. So say you're running on a 2-hour sprint and you really need to focus on what's in front of you. You can turn on do not disturb for 2 hours, and then it'll eliminate all the notifications, which is something that we both did before even hopping on this call. We're like, all right, we're getting on. Do not disturb, do not disturb, do not disturb. It's like way too many devices. And that allows you to eliminate those notifications. So I think there's a lot of distractions through technology. However, I'm in a different life position than you are, because I am single without a family. You are working from home with a wife and kids. So pivot to those distractions. You have a different set of distractions than I do.
Yeah, well, and I want to start with the digital even, because I think something I'd improved at in the office setting was closing my office door. So what I've had to do is close my proverbial Slack door, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's huge.
One time I literally sent a message, and that's something that I want to incorporate more, is like sending that message saying, hey, I'm done. Or like this morning, I knew we were still finishing Sabbath. So I sent a message and said, Whitney and I will not be responding until 1:00. At 1:03, I responded about a meeting today. But I was like, I want everybody to know we're not ignoring you, but the Slack door is shut. So I think like for us to do our great works that require focus, we have to have the self-discipline. Nobody can do that for us.
It's huge.
To put our device down, to shut the door. I think the other thing is, when I think about my phone, is Instagram formerly was just a source of semi-communication, mostly mindless work or posting. Now this is like work. So
no, it is. It's not like work. It is work.
It is work, especially for you. But even for me, so what I'm trying to figure out is, how do I almost treat it like Slack or an email? Okay, I'm going to get on and check my messages because this is vital. I'm going to schedule time to do a post because this is how I can interact with people. So it's like, but then that can easily turn into, well, I did 15 minutes to work on my content. I put out some content, I responded to people, and then I spent 15 minutes wasting time.
And it's okay to have that discover page.
Man, yeah.
It's real.
So that's like,
and I think to that point, like lines have been blurred more than ever before, because like Zoom, for instance, used to be like a really work only program. Like it was used for conference calling through work. Dude, I had a virtual hangout session with some family members the other day through Zoom. I'm going to have one at the end of this week too. We're having this right now. I'm having Zoom conversations through my church groups that I'm in. I'm having Zoom conversations with clients that we work with. And then same thing goes with social. Like we're using social to communicate with people for work, but then I also use it personally on that front too. And so quite frankly, same with FaceTime, same with text messaging, same with all of these things. We have more freedom than ever before. And with that, we have less restrictions than ever before. And so we have to have those self-imposed restrictions. I know that there's like a big movement of people right now that are doing this thing that no one's ever heard of, which is turning on an out of office response on your email. Like that typically used to be something that you only did if you were like out on vacation for 2 weeks. People are doing that like days in and days out now. They're like, I only check my emails on Mondays. And so therefore Tuesday to the next Monday, they have an out of office email sent, or vice versa if they're only checking on Fridays and whatnot. And then like Slack has built-in features where it's like, hey, I'm away right now and I will turn my setting back from away to here once I'm back. But if I'm away, don't expect a response. You can text me all you want. I will not be there. I think the hardest barrier to entry, and this is something that, man, again, I'm not good at. Dude, I do so much work communication through texting. Like we have a Slack set up, we have emails. I do so much through texting. And that's one where you have a lot of struggle in keeping that balance between work and personal life. And so I know something that you do, which is pretty magical. You have like different options set up between your primary contacts, like with your family and whatnot, and then everyone else. And if you don't follow into that like super important primary section, you don't get notifications if you have certain settings turned on, right?
Yeah, that's right. So
And
when I
that's
turn on my
awesome.
do not disturb, like only my favorites can call me. So
Yeah.
it's just like
So
a
Todd just
little
has that
way.
on 24/7.
Well, if I haven't texted you back recently, that's why. No,
That's
but
why.
and I think, yeah, and I think I also just have to not feel guilty. Like honestly, right now, because of Sabbath, I have over 40 text messages to respond to. Now, granted, I'll probably wipe out
Real.
20 of those into group text of just like,
Sure.
banter, cool, but like I need to get to that this evening, or,
Yeah.
actually probably when we get off this, but I can't feel guilt about it because I had a Sabbath. Now, where I
Yeah.
can do better is maybe like giving some prior notice to that. And I need to keep
Sure.
thinking through that.
Sure.
But again, that's like, it's healthy for me to have 40 text messages, even though it also grates at me because Sabbath was more important. Does that
Man,
make
and
sense?
that's huge. Like I know something that I've caught myself doing, and I've had to really like correct my mindset in this. Like there have been times where I've text someone like that morning, they didn't respond to me all day, and then they like posted a picture that evening on their social. And I was like, how dare you interact there before you respond to what I need over here? But I do think it's a mindset shift of just because I have the option to communicate with someone doesn't mean they have the obligation to respond to me within their timeline. Like there's a big
Mhm.
separation there. You have the freedom to be able to contact people. They have the responsibility to manage that and make sure they're not putting too much of their time into that. And that's something I'm guilty of. But I do think that has to be a mindset shift across the board to where like you set up
Mhm.
those expectations with your coworkers, with your boss. Like the only people you can't set up those expectations with really are with your family. Like
Yeah.
obviously like that's like an open area of communication, but a lot of people need to be able to set up these expectations where it's like, hey, just because you text me and I don't text back doesn't mean I don't like you. It means I have some priorities to where like I have to get to those before I circle back around to you. And I'm going to circle back around and be responsible with that. Obviously, you don't want to leave people out to dry all the time because you'll ruin relationships. But
Yeah.
you really do have to manage those in a more efficient manner than letting just an open heyday for all communication to access you.
I agree. I think that's huge. So,
Yeah.
man, preach. Easier to talk
But
about than implement, but it's good.
ways to talk about that implement. I'm terrible at implementing that. Okay, but distractions in your home for
Oh, yeah.
you with
Family.
family and kids, like how does that look?
Yeah. So I think number one is I would just say to you that's single, to anybody that's single, like marry a teammate, search for a teammate more than
Yeah.
just a lover. If you want to find somebody like Whitney was serving in a church, working in a church before I ever met her, she would be serving in a church, like working hard in her career with or
Yeah.
without me. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? So then it's easier to run because we're teammates. We get it. Like
Yeah.
we do church together, like we lead together. So I
Yeah.
think that's huge because it starts with we're on the same page. And then I think the key to eliminating those distractions is communication.
Yeah.
Like something we talked about last week that I was doing awful at. I've been doing better since is, hey, I would like to start work at this time. Hey, I would like to end at this time. Something
Yeah.
I'm working on this week is talk tomorrow about implementing some breaks when it's my first full day. Hey,
Yeah.
I'd like to have a break at this time so I can help with nap time. So we
Mm-hmm.
can do Bible time with the boys together. Like,
Yeah.
I think to me that communication is just absolutely huge. And
Yeah.
that's how to eliminate the distractions. And then I also have to understand that like Oliver was a little bit sick last week.
Sure.
So, but guess what? That would happen whether I was at home or at the office. It just
Mm-hmm.
feels heightened now. So I have to remind myself,
Mm-hmm.
this is actually a very normal thing. It feels more intense, but
Yeah.
I just need to relax and, be interrupted versus
Yeah.
getting so frustrated, which was my default response last week.
Well, and I think one of the amazing things about that is you set yourself up to where your mindset is one to where you're always ready to pivot based off of the situation. And
Yes.
so because he's sick, you can pivot and then you can restructure your other things. And they're obviously still prioritize them, but you restructure them to where they fit into this new narrative of this is the situation. And I think something
Yes.
that's really cool and interesting is you talked about like, okay, well, I'm going to take a break here so I can help with nap time. You can't do that when you're in the office because you're gone all
Yes.
day long. And
Yeah.
so the like really beautiful part of this whole situation is people are able to prioritize things differently and honestly a little bit better than they ever were
Mm-hmm.
before, because they're with their family in that
Yes.
environment all the time. And so don't get me wrong, there are downsides and struggles and tensions and frustrations, but I think there are a lot of positives too.
I think so too. And I'll give like a really practical example. So Friday he was sick and just some other extraneous circumstances. So I planned on working about 8 hours on Friday. I
Yeah.
worked a little under 3.75. I'm really weird in how I keep up with stuff. So what I do,
So
I
detailed.
pivoted. Yeah. And Saturday was an 8 hour work day. So it
Yeah.
started with 45 minutes before the boys went up. We talked, and during nap time and a little bit beyond, I worked from 3 to 6. And then honestly, I worked quite a bit from till about 2:30 that morning. Not
Pulling those
ideal.
late hours. Yeah,
Yeah. Not sustainable. But hey,
definitely.
it was
But you were
necessary. I
able
got
to
it
effectively
done.
pivot within the situation.
Yep. And I was still able to like relax and enjoy family time on Saturday versus being like, when am I going to get this done? You know?
Yeah,
So I think it's like, again, is that sustainable to do like for the rest of my life? No, but we pivoted
sure. Sure.
and now we'll regroup this week. And that is
Yeah.
easier because I'm at home. So again, it's just
Yeah.
like, what's my perspective on this?
Yeah.
You know?
That's super
So,
awesome. And then
yeah.
I think kind of
So,
the third big thing in
mhm,
helping make sure people that are working from home are able to really adapt and thrive within that. So obviously we talked about creating structure and self-management within that. We talked about eliminating distractions. I think the natural extension of both of those leads to setting up an environment that
yeah.
actually positions you to be effective versus
Mhm.
puts you in a position to where you're constantly drawn away from productivity.
Yeah, I love that. So my solution is just marry an interior designer. See you guys. Have a nice day.
Boom.
Yeah.
Positive. You're set, dude.
No, so like Whitney, literally, we moved our whole bedroom to create an environment for me because we don't have an extra bedroom. We've got two
Yeah.
boys. They're young and each need their own room at this point.
Yeah.
And so it was like, this gives me a space.
Yeah.
And like, I think some things that are huge is like, it's clean.
Yeah.
It's clearly defined. Like, and it's like, it's awesome. Like I walk in here and honestly, I feel really good because she was thoughtful about it and set me up for success.
Heck
So
yeah.
I think that clearly defined, clean space is just huge. And then my part is when I'm done today, I need to organize stuff so my desk is clean, and which I
Mhm.
did at the office too. So
Sure.
it's a carryover. So that
Sure.
way, when I come to bed at night, I'm not looking at just a pile of junk, but I'm looking at
Right.
clearly organized things that, you know what, I'll get there tomorrow when my workday
Yeah.
starts. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
And I think that's a cool look at like maximizing your reality. Because again, like not a lot of people are in a position where they have this like spare room where they're like, well, I can just set up an office. I'm totally separated. Because from like an ideal standpoint, you would never have your desk next to your bed. That's like the worst ideal, because then you just have this thing right behind you that could call your name at all hours of the day. Like, oh, I can just grab my iPad and I can lie down and work. I can like, typically that's not ideal, but because you segmented and you
Hmm.
set up clearly defined boundaries within that, it's a new workspace and you treat it as such. You don't treat
Yes.
it as your bedroom. You treat it as an office that happens to be within your bedroom. And
Yeah.
behind you, your bed is made and you're not lying in it.
Literally. Yeah.
Like, and I think that's one of the biggest things in this whole like concept of environment as well as systems. Like, so many people are really quick to not get up in the morning and to work from bed.
Hmm.
Terrible decision.
Yep.
Rarely ever works out in your favor. And then because they're doing that, they have no separation of environment from the life that they're living in versus the life that they're working in. Whereas what you did is, even though you were constrained by your reality of you don't have any extra space, you were still
Hmm.
able to set up a segmented workspace and area that is a clearly defined new boundaries situation. That's super
Yes.
awesome.
Yeah. And I think I want to reach back into, I got to coach high school football for several years and I'm still involved with Bradley Central. And I've said Damon Floyd, the head coach, he's the best boss I've ever had. And he used
Yeah.
to tell our players this all the time. He said, look good, play good. So he
Yeah.
left a lot of freedom for the accessories and all the stuff they wanted to wear. Cause he's like, look, if you look good and you like what you're wearing, you're going to like be confident and you're going to go out and ball out, you know?
Yeah.
So I think like from
It's
a
awesome.
home standpoint, like, we need to get dressed,
Yeah.
like get up, exercise, whatever that looks like, take a
Yeah.
shower. Like, I think those things are absolutely huge for like creating a routine that, just like if I was going to compete in a sports environment, I would have a pregame routine. So I
Yeah.
had a routine at my office. So now I'm creating a new one, but
Yeah.
I've got a
You're
routine
adapting.
here. Like, I'm dressed today. I took a shower. I've already exercised. Like,
Yeah.
those are things that need to be like set in place, because then I'm not stumbling over here and like, okay, what do I do?
Yeah.
Like I'm ready. And I think the other part of that Whitney really challenged me with, and I'd read this in Michael Hyatt and Carey Nieuwhof, and I mean, all these people I'd heard about this, but I'd never done
Yeah.
it, is I am now taking a few minutes at the end of each day and setting my big goals for the next day.
That's so awesome.
And that's huge.
Yeah.
So it's huge in helping bring closure, but it's also just another type of setting up my environment. So when I like arrive at my office, tomorrow, I know things may shift, but here's Michael Hyatt says 3 things. I'm not there. It's more like 6 or 7. I'll get to 3.
Sure.
But like,
Sure.
here's the priorities.
Here's your big 3. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. So like today, coming off Sabbath, I wasn't like, oh, what am I going to do? I knew exactly what I had. I've got this time, this meeting, I'm meeting with you. Like, it's just a calmness that preparation brings, Yeah.
So, no, I love that. And I think to that point too, something that I was in the position of, and I'm still a little bit in the position of, but way more so pre this whole situation, is I rarely had a set office environment that I'd go to. I was quite mobile in where I worked from. So I'd work from home occasionally. I'd work in an office that we had occasionally, and then I'd work on site with a client all the time. And so for me during that time, and I slacked a little bit and I got a lot better over the past few days, is my like digital environment and setting that up for success. And so I think like something that really helps me there is like cleanliness in your main areas that you're working in. So like I'm really big into like cleanliness in my email. Like if it's an email, it's been processed, the thing's been done, get it out of the way. So that sets you up for success for later. Same with calendar, and then same with Monday, which is how I manage all my tasks and whatnot, is monday.com. So I have this like big board in there that's called my master board. And within that, I have like big picture things. I have to-dos, I have handoffs, I have all that jazz. Yes. But setting that up the night before, similar to what you're doing, is super key to being effective the following day. Whereas if that's not set up, it's kind of a mess. It's a Hail Mary.
Man. Yeah. So, and let me ask you this, Will. So like on Monday, when your work week starts, or even Sunday night, do you take maybe an hour or time and like organize and figure out what didn't get done, what you've got to do? Do you like really set aside that time?
I try to do that on Sunday. So I try to do that at the end of the weekend, because what I've found is when I try to do that at the beginning of the workday, it's not nearly as clear, if that makes sense. Like my day has already been bogged down by all these other things, whereas like what I'm thinking of over the weekend are the things that are typically really the most important things. When you get into the office or your work week starts, there are all these other things that they need to get done, but they're not the important things that you were thinking about and that you need to do. And so I think like for me, solidifying those things, even though it's taking up a little bit of my off time, solidifying those before I get into work mode helps with the prioritization when I am in work mode.
Man, I love that. And I would say to everybody listening, like, figure out your way to do that. When I take that time, whatever it looks like for me, I'm so much better. And so I love your system, and I love that. So if I could encourage people, I'd be like, do that. That's huge.
That's awesome. Okay. So we've talked a ton about productivity within the home work environment when you are working. However, there are a lot of people in this situation that aren't working anymore. And I know that a lot of them are looking at the people that are working and saying, man, I really wish I was working, because that would help me be able to pay my bills a lot easier, would be able to make sure I have food a lot easier. And there are 1,000,004 downsides to not working. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's great that you're not working, but I do think there are potentially some upsides with the amount of time people have on their hands if used wisely. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so as a sports weirdo nerd, I read an article about just NBA dads and how they were helping with homeschooling. And like one had set up like a PE course in the backyard and was like their kid's PE teacher. So like obviously they have probably more margin financially than the rest of us. But I love that. It was just really cool to see them. For those guys, they would be in like the thick, like the busiest part of their year, and now they're just at home. And they were like, it's weird. My kids say mama all the time, and it's like, hey, actually, I'm home now. But like they were adjusting. So I think it's like the first thing I would say is just viewpoint, like try to, something we've talked about as a church is like we see through limitations and move to breakthrough. Like what's the breakthrough that you can have at home. And so I'll start with the worst. I think probably
Yeah.
the worst thing we could do is just Lost is probably my favorite TV show of all time. But the worst thing any of us could do is take a show like Lost and watch all 7
Just watch
seasons in
all of it.
7
Dude, you
days.
have so much
Yeah.
time on your hands. You can rewatch the whole series in just a few
Yeah.
days. Come
Yeah,
on,
that's
let's
probably
go.
not wise, you know?
No, probably not.
But I think something you and I've talked about and is just like, do the things you never get to do.
Yeah.
So those things that every month you're like, next month, next month, next month, like
Yeah.
now you have some time to do those, whether that's exercising, reading more, getting better just at your craft.
Yeah.
Again, I know it's really difficult for people in that situation. I know there's so much financial stress, but
Yeah.
hopefully they can even lean into that season a little bit and
Yeah.
grow through it, whereas they won't be able to in another season. Does that
Yeah.
help?
No, I think that's huge. And I think that like one of the quickest responses to that could be, well, I don't have any money to do that. Well, you don't necessarily need money to improve yourself. You might not have money to do the big project that you've been wanting to do for years, but you 100% don't need money in order to exercise more. Because quite frankly, you can do that without any special workout clothes or equipment or even a gym membership. But oftentimes, like, you don't really need money to probably read more, because the reality is we all have these things, and there are plenty of free things out there. Like, there's so many things that we can be doing to improve your current reality, whether it's reading, whether it's exercising, whether it's watching tutorials online. I think Masterclass gave out a lot of their subscriptions at a hugely reduced rate, just because of the current situation. And I know so many people that are like giving away digital resources because they recognize a lot of people right now want to capitalize on this time to learn, which I think is so amazing. But I think that right now, and this is a little bit of a harsh thing to say, but I'll say it because I think it's real. I was talking to someone the other day, more on the front end of this situation, and we were getting really real and honest about what this situation is going to look like over the coming weeks and potentially even months. And if you've been tracking along, there's a reality in, as we've been isolating more, you've seen things like depression and suicide rates spike. You've seen things like domestic violence spike. And there are a lot of these really big issues and tensions. And when you step back and take a look at it, the answer is kind of obvious. We have less ways to distract ourselves than we do in normal life. You can watch Netflix for 12 hours a day, but guess what? You're going to get really sick of that eventually. And we're all going to have to come to terms with our own reality right now, both the good and the bad of it. And I don't mean our reality in regards to COVID-19. I mean who we are as people and the reality that we're living in, and the face we have to look at in the mirror every day. Like, I think we're in a really uncomfortable, friction-filled situation because you can't hide from yourself nearly as easy as you can outside of this situation. You're stuck with yourself 24/7, and you have way less ways to mask it. And the only way to mask it effectively is through this thing. And quite frankly, people are even getting sick of this, which is a miracle in itself, because that hasn't happened up until now. But to that point, I think that there are so many ways that we're given the opportunity to improve ourselves within this time. We have nothing but time, and time is the scarcest of resources, and we have more of it than we've ever had before. So I think even if you're lacking in finances or anything like that, I know there are ways that each and every one of us can improve our personal lives through this extra allotted time given. I know something that I've been doing is capitalizing on the resources I already had through digital. And I have been connecting with more people than I ever have before, which is so funny because in times of isolation, I'm having more human connection than I did pre times of isolation, which is, it's radical. Like, when I used to have times where I would maybe listen to music or podcasts if I was like driving somewhere, or just in everyday life listening to musical podcasts, I'm calling people and I'm having Zooms. And the fact that I'm able to have more touch points with people, and that's improving my soul and who I am through resources I already had, is awesome.
I love that. Man, I think that's huge. And yeah, your viewpoint there is very needed and even challenging to me. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And I think, just to emphasize, we have to face ourselves. And so, like, I think it would be a loss if we walked out of this season completely distracted and we look back and didn't improve ourselves in some way and didn't at
Yeah.
least take some time to stare in the mirror and go, it may not be pretty, but this
Yeah.
is where we're at and how do I move forward? I think that's huge.
Yeah.
So
To that point, I was in a giant Zoom call with like 35 people the other day with public church, with our public worship team. And something that I believe it was Stephanie West said was that she's honestly really excited for the end of this because she knows that she's going to walk out of this season with a life that looks a lot different than she walked into this season with. And she's realizing that because all of this extra time that's been given to her has made her realize all the things and areas that could be good things and areas that she was pouring herself into that weren't giving her that return on her investment as well as they should have. And so you look at time as a resource. She's pouring time into all these different areas, and she's realizing that a lot of them aren't as fulfilling as she thought they were, because now that they've been stripped away from her, she's finding other areas, a lot of which is family, that she can pour more of herself into and get more out of. And so I think it's so cool that her perspective in this is like, on the end of this, at the other side of this, my life is going to look different. It's probably going to look less busy, is something that she said, but it's going to look better than when I entered into this. And I think she's come to that conclusion because this has been forced isolation, but self-analysis time where she's been able to look at her life and say, you know, these are areas to where I thought I was good and locked away and squared off in, but I actually really need to shift and reprioritize some things. I think that was amazing. Like, we were on that call for like an hour and a half. That was the only thing I took away, was that one thing. Like that, and that was awesome.
Oh, I love that. And honestly, I think that what you're saying there really fits the combined impact in our heart, is that we want to meet leaders right where they're at in COVID-19, in this, but we want everyone to emerge from this just like Stephanie's going to. We want ourselves to emerge from this, like that we've been impacted, that we've moved ourselves forward, and that we've been a part of helping others move forward as well. So, man, that's phenomenal.
That's awesome. Todd, thanks for talking today. This has been awesome.
Yeah, I love it. And look forward to our next conversation, man. And hey, you're an incredible leader, Will. Tons of respect for you. So really enjoyed this. Likewise. And I'm glad that we've made time to stay connected during this. That's really important to me.
I am too. I'm really appreciating this. I'm really looking forward to the next one.
Yes, definitely. All right. Love you, man. We'll talk soon.
Love you, Todd. Bye.